Welcome to the Digital Transformation Podcast, interviews with best-selling authors, innovative thought leaders, and top-shelf executives, all driving today's digital success. This is the show that will help you take advantage of digital transformation to build your business and career. I'm your host, Kevin Klain, and I'm so pleased that you're listening. Our guest today is Keith Klain. Keith is director in the KPMG quality engineering practice in the UK. And Keith has built software quality management and testing teams for global financial services organizations and consulting firms in the US, the UK, Asia Pacific. He helps enterprise technology organizations increase their business value through process efficiency, increased automation, and a better alignment of IT strategy to business objectives. Prior to KPMG, Keith was the executive vice president of the Association for Software Testing and the recipient of the Software Test Professionals Luminary Award. He's with us today to talk about software quality and test engineering. Keith, welcome to the show. Now, you say that software quality and test engineering practices can support and accelerate digital transformation. How so?
So good software testing and quality engineering practices should support digital transformation and do more than just deliver technology change or checking the functional correctness of a system. The information testing provides can help drive innovation or identify opportunities for investment in risk management, and they should do those things actively, not passively or as a byproduct. An example of this is kind of operational intelligence. So testing and quality engineering is very well placed for a view on user experience and also has objective critical distance on end-to-end processes, complexity, or waste in your business flows, all of which are prime targets for transformation or contributors to further digitization. Another example is input on investment decisions. Technology operational budgets are continually squeezed, and spending should be targeted around gaps in coverage related to usage and risk. So quality engineering and testing has a front row seat on how a company builds, tests, and its customers use their systems, and can bring a lot to the table in investment discussions. So in order to support digital transformation, your test and quality engineering approach has to be aligned to your business strategy. And too often, in my experience, enterprise test approaches actually inject risk into the business by not covering key threats. So when I'm helping a client improve their quality engineering strategy, I start with, asking how their approach would help their CFO, with questions like, how do we help validate regulatory compliance or financial risk? Are we identifying operational governance gaps and redundancies? What threats to our business have we observed during testing? So, and through, answering those types of questions, you can identify lots of opportunities for transformation. So, in my opinion, good testing and quality engineering practices are essential to not just accelerating, but really actually delivering a digital transformation program.
Now, beyond the alignment of IT strategy to business objectives, what's an essential step to good software testing that you feel is often overlooked or underappreciated?
A common thread and a lot of the problems I see organizations have in getting the most value out of their quality engineering budget or programs is focusing too much on project risk as opposed to business risk in their test strategy. In a lot of enterprise technology, that's generally the result of an overemphasis on checking functional correctness of systems and products as their primary quality management process, which is underpinned by this idea that past tests equal quality. Even though we know what a test can pass and there's still a problem. So as a result of that perception, a lot of organizations get in a mad rush to create as many tests as possible using only could instead of should as their primary algorithm on whether or not to write tests. So what gets missed in all that is good test strategy and design practices. In my experience, that's where the seeds are sown for most of the problems that you'll experience later in your delivery pipeline. And unfortunately, a lot of the testing industry, isn't a lot of help with this, despite all the marketing in the testing business. And by that, I mean kind of test vendors, consultants, and test tool makers. They're typically not aligned to identifying business risks and are almost solely concentrated on the operational cost reduction aspects of tooling. So my point is that change delivery is very important, but it's only one aspect of a good quality engineering strategy. So diving straight into technical solutions without understanding the larger context and business risks you're trying to address through your test approach is a big part of a lot organizations miss.
All right, so let's talk about practices that really move the needle, or what are the best practices that you feel are the most powerful? It's interesting to say, you said testing could versus should. So what are the ones that we absolutely should embrace, and how can our listeners begin to adopt those practices in ways that really make a difference?
I think first, in order to set some context for those practices, we need to talk a little bit about quality and how it kind of relates to testing. So, quality is a complex thing, right? It's got multi-dimensional attributes. Views on quality are highly biased. They're almost impossible to quantify. Quality is difficult to communicate in linear or binary statistics, and most views on quality that people hold are heavily reliant on kind of anecdotal evidence. So, in my opinion, because of its complexity, software quality can only be managed and not solved. So a lot of approaches to test engineering are entirely focused on trying to solve your quality problems. And if you read industry reports on test engineering, you'll find that what companies are struggling most with are really what I would consider foundational issues. Things like strategy, coverage modeling, usage modeling, debugging tests, and reporting, which are not really technical practices, So from a test engineering perspective, my first advice is to stop thinking about your test approach as an isolated series of events. A test pipeline should be informed by different types of tests that are run throughout that pipeline. And really with advances in kind of test automation and monitoring tools today, in my opinion, a great deal of that kind of functional checking through that pipeline should be automated. So that's a great place to start. But just increasing kind of like cheap, shallow, flaky checks of a system really can give a false sense of security. And in my opinion, really unintentionally build fragility into a system due to overconfidence and kind of risk of systemic failure. So focus on, observations, not binary test results like pass-fail ratios, as they drive, a lot of bad behavior and dysfunction in your test team. And your automated test pipeline should also present opportunities for additional test activities, and investment to support, or manage the risk of transformation.
Do you want to be a guest on the Digital Transformation Podcast? Well, it could happen when you join our Knowledge Leadership Circle. Tell us about your ideas and advice. What technologies and solutions do you recommend? And how can our listeners benefit from your approach? Be a guest. Find out more at digitaltransformationpodcast.net/guest.
You're listening to the Digital Transformation Podcast.
Our guest today is Keith Klain. He is director in the KPMG quality engineering practice in the UK and an expert at software quality and test engineering. And that's what we're talking about, software quality, test engineering, and digital transformation. Now, Keith, process automation is on the minds of organizations as a way to improve organizational performance, but users often struggle to make the connection between everyday processes and automation capabilities. What's your advice to make that linkage?
So that's a great question. Automation and testing is one of the biggest topics in our industry right now, but a lot of organizations I work with are struggling to get the value they think they should be from getting it. So to make that linkage and to help identify opportunities between what you can and what should be automated, I would focus on first how we talk about automation and our objectives, as that's going to help manage your expectations around it. Frequently, the only objective for automation seems to be workforce reduction. And that creates a kind of natural tension between the people who have the good ideas about how to get more efficient at what you're trying to automate. And in quality engineering, my view is that the primary goal of automation should be to extend the reach of the tester, not replace the tester. We're looking for things like redundancy or inefficiency in our process, unneeded overlapping effort for similar tasks, non-prioritized test coverage. You'll find that in large regressive test automation suites. So finding those things help us see the delta between what we need and what we're getting. So by changing how we think and talk about automation and what it can actually do for us, particularly in quality engineering, that kind of moves the conversation beyond replacing people and into a much more productive one about bridging the gap to kind of make people more effective.
Now, Keith, you help enterprise technology organizations increase their business value through things like process efficiency and automation, and as we mentioned, the alignment of strategies. What is one way that organizations can really bring that synergy to their operations?
So if I had to give one piece of advice to increase synergy across your IT operation in regard to kind of quality engineering or your test approach, it would be to stop thinking of testing as a phase and trying to quantify quality through counting things. For the last 20 years or so, testing has been subjected to a great deal of organizational dysfunction, cost controls, location strategies, third-party exposure risk. That's led to a lot of models or processes for testing that are inappropriately targeted and drive organizational dysfunction. So there's a great book I reference a lot by Robert Austin. It's titled, Managing and Measuring Performance in Organizations. And he talks a lot about applying targets to measures and the effect that has on people being measured. Most popular quality engineering measures and metrics drive dysfunctional behavior in teams, and yet we continue to utilize them. And I'm talking about things like counting test cases, pass-fail ratios, test case efficiency, metrics that don't add a lot of value to your delivery capability, and reporting that information as, under the guise of operational intelligence as part of your approach to risk management kind of greatly decreases the value of your test team, as well as mismanages your own expectations. So instead, I think we should be talking about things like what your test approach can do and how automation fits into that, kind of the checking and testing paradigm, understanding the deltas between how we build, test, and use our products, because those gaps of our understanding are where a lot of kind of nasty defects can lurk. And talking about things like instrumentation for observability, monitoring, and the technical environments in which we build stuff. So done right, quality engineering reveals a lot of in-depth information about your delivery process, your business operations, how you allocate capital. All I have to do is observe this information and report on it. But unfortunately, a lot of those insights are lost due to focusing on bad reporting, time constraints, and as well where testing sits in a lot of technology organizations. So my advice would be, drop your testing metrics program, or at least measure it like you do all your other technical disciplines, and you'll start to see those synergies pick up across your teams.
Interesting. What you measure is what you manage.
Yes, absolutely. Well, I think, that adage has driven a lot of dysfunction in technology organizations as well. If you can't measure it, you can't manage it.
What do you mean by that?
What I mean by that is people aiming for targets and driving the wrong behavior. So looking for, if you're counting test cases, people will tend towards creating more test cases to get their pass-fail ratios up or more consistent, as opposed to what you want them to be doing, which is to be finding deep defects and problems with your products before they get released, as opposed to focusing on kind of productivity issues. So that's what I mean by some of the dysfunctional behavior that those metrics will drive.
You are listening.
You are listening.
You are listening.
You're listening to
the Digital Transformation Podcast.
We are here with Keith Klain with KPMG. He is an expert at software quality and test engineering and the recipient of a Software Test Professionals Luminary Award. Now, Keith, we have reached the action item round of the show. I'm wondering if you could please provide us with 3 quick action items that our listeners can do to begin to take advantage of your ideas and advice.
Sure. I've got 3 different items in 3 different categories. So my first one being business and testing alignment. Align your test approach to your business strategy to look for systemic risk in your operating models and exposure to changes in the market. The second one would be kind of on information and objective strategy. Make sure you optimize your test process to get information on kind of risk and delivery capabilities to the right people at the right time for release decisions and impact to customers. And thirdly, on opportunities and risks, deliver operational insights into dysfunction and mismatches and expectations around your delivery capabilities, because that's going to reduce your risk exposure and present other opportunities for digitization or transformation.
Well, Keith, it's been great speaking with you today. We're almost out of time, but before I let you go, one last question. What should technologists, executives, business owners, all of us really be thinking about now and strategizing for today in order to be prepared for the world in 5 years' time?
So I know it gets overused a lot in our industry, but my advice would be to gear your testing and quality engineering teams for more frequent and greater disruption. I'll take as an example the digital payment technology space. There's been a lot of innovation in that, probably more so in the last 10 years than there has been in the previous 100. And I think we're likely to see kind of more bundling of capabilities there, as well as, as customers are looking for kind of seamless experience for digital transactions from kind of point of sale through mobile, through banking. If you use London as an example, almost 50% of all bank accounts are digital only, which is roughly double since 2010. And mobile experience actually is now ahead of branch location as your determining factor for which bank you want to use. So that's a lot of change in a relatively short period of time, and it's only accelerating. And I think, as our worlds become further integrated and digitized, the role of regulation is another example where disruption is going to come fast and adaptation will be a requirement to do business. So in the UK SOX, which is the Sarbanes-Oxley Act for the UK, will be coming in the next 2 to 5 years. And if people don't know what that was kind of the US regs post the 2002 financial crisis, kind of Enron WorldCom period. Now, for a lot of firms in the UK, the US SOX requirements for banking should already be in place. But with this new version of it, the first time they're looking at IT architecture, controls testing, control automation, and actually cultural requirements to adopt the changes. So, there was a report in the Financial Times recently that said about 430 million pounds of costs to UK businesses would come because they're extending the number to almost 2,000 additional companies that will fall within the proposed rules. So that's a whole bunch of new operations that will have to adjust to the new way of doing things, and the interconnectedness of our digital world today. There's a lot of implications for a lot of people. So in short, I would get up to speed on how complex systems fail by Richard Cooks and prepare my quality teams for a lot more disruption in the future.
That is Keith Klain with the KPMG Quality Engineering Practice in the UK. You can find Keith and find out more at kpmg.co.uk. Keith, thank you so much for being our guest today on the Digital Transformation Podcast.
Thanks, Kevin. It was great talking to you, and I'll hopefully be back whenever you have me.
That'll do it for this episode of the Digital Transformation Podcast. But join me next time when I continue to talk to best-selling authors, innovative thought leaders, and top-shelf executives, all driving today's digital success. And I'll talk to you next time on the Digital Transformation Podcast. Do you want to be a guest? Well, it could happen. Find out more at digitaltransformationpodcast.net/guest.